So the console table is all taken apart again. I made a little 1/8 round over on the bottom edge of the stringer, both stringers rather, just to get rid of the really sharp edge that was there from all the cuts. Now we're on to sanding. So everything has been given an 80 once over with 80 grit. We're going up to 180 on the orbital sander, random orbital sander. So we'll do 120 on that, then 180, and then we'll do a 220. So lots and lots of sanding. I won't bore you with those details, but I'll come back when I've got things sanded and we're ready to do some test finish. All right, there's our pieces all sanded. We've gone 180 grit, obviously, 120, and just finished up with the 180 on all pieces. What I'm gonna do now is raise the grain. So I'll wet all this wood. That'll bring the grain up just a little bit. We'll go over it again with 180. Then we'll do a 220 and begin the stain. So I'll bring you back when I wet the grain, because that is really gonna pop out the color of the wood and what it could look like when it's finished. So be right back. So ready now to put some stain on the table, but I've got a few sample pieces here that I'm going to put on first. Now these samples are representations of the wood that's actually in the table itself. So we see a lot of this whiter wood in the legs. These pieces are represented mostly what's in the top of the table. This is actually a piece off the support that holds up the top of the table. So a lot of red oak, variations on that red oak. These are fundamentally the same piece, but slightly different coloring, maybe just on shadow actually. So just some marks that are in there. We'll see. What I want to do, of course, is get a consistent color across the whole table. It's going to be a bit of a challenge given the variety of the wood. I mean, going from this to this, you can see that's just starkly different. So how do you make that even appear to be the same? So we're going to take a two-step approach with this. I'm going to start by applying this Simply White stain, just to kind of get everything, hopefully, to a more consistent and paler texture. And then once that has set, we're going to apply some Chestnut stain. Oops, showing you the French. Here we are. Going to apply this Chestnut gel stain. So that hopefully that two-step approach will, with the Simply White, kind of get everything into a common, I'm going to say common palette. I don't know what the right term is, but at least subdue the incredible overtones that we'd get. It should make this a little bit more consistent with this, certainly. Hopefully tone this down quite a bit and even out some of the variety that we get in here, so that when we apply the chestnut will be on top of the white as opposed to the chestnut bringing out the rich grains of the wood. So we'll see how that turns out. So here's our pieces after applying the soft white. So I'm going to let that set for a couple hours, and then I'm going to apply the chestnut gel coat. So what I'll try to do is fade from one to the other so you can see this. And there are the pieces with some chestnut stain applied over top of the Simply White. And yeah, quite pleased with the result of that. It really has kind of evened up all of the pieces in terms of coloring. Okay, so we've gone over the entire piece with the 80, the 120, the 180, given it a wet the whole piece to raise the grain up to, and then gone over it with the 180 again. I'm just going to give it the final sand with the 220. I think I'd mentioned that I'd done the 220 before. I was wrong. It was the 180 that I had done. So a quick once over with the 220. We'll cover all the pieces, and then we'll start applying the stain. Alright, we've got all that sanded down now. One of the biggest challenges I find with sanding is not pushing on the sander. That's why you see me, as I'm holding the sander, I'm grasping the sander down here rather than putting my hand on the top. I find when I put my hand on the top, there's just this natural tendency to apply pressure. And I have discovered and taken the advice of other woodworkers that I've seen and others on YouTube, let the sandpaper do the work, it's not you doing the work. So in fact, what I've found myself doing is I'm sanding, sometimes I'm actually lifting up the sander off the workpiece, just taking the weight of the sander itself off the paper. And that lets the sander float a little more smoothly and lets the paper do the work. Anyway, this has turned out really nice. I'm very happy with that. So I'm going to dust it all off and then let's apply that top coat of Simply White, or the undercoat actually. We'll call that the undercoat, the Simply White stain. So just finished mixing up or stirring up our Simply White stain. You want to make sure you get all the solids off the bottom of the can. And what I'm doing is I'm just using this little foam brush to get the stain from the can onto the piece. Then I'm going to be using a cloth just to rub the stain into the wood. And I'll do a piece at a time, a section at a time. This is where you can see some portions of the wood really do absorb the stain better than others. For example, this grain work through here, through this oak, really seems to soak the stain up very well. So I'm kind of happy that it's picking up the white and soaking that in first, because when we apply the darker stain, the chestnut, that would really make that, if the chestnut got absorbed into that stuff, that grain, it would really darken the piece and make quite a stark contrast from one piece to the next. So this is where using this Simply White really will help to even out the tone of the wood throughout. Even a lot of heavy kind of spotting through here where the dark stain would really soak into that and darken up that section and leave this section quite white. So nice contrast we'll get out of it, or nice evenness we will get out of this, not contrast, a nice evenness. And just turn the camera up a little bit. Now where I have these two applications overlapping, I do want to make sure that I even it out here as much as I can. Okay, so that's the top side. Flip it over and do the bottom side now, and then I'll come back and do the edges separately. And on this side, this is where things get really interesting, I think, with this white stain, because we do have a bunch of dark blotches here, and this is where the Simply White will really do a nice job to even that out a bit. You may notice a little bit of marking through here. These pieces were a little bit thin and I didn't want to go down more than I had already gone with the router sled. So I realized I was kind of sacrificing some of the integrity of the finish here, but again, being on the underside and right behind the skirts that are supports that are holding the top, I thought I'll probably get away with that. Alright, that's our underside done. What I'm going to do now is just kind of go over the edge, and then I'll bring over the two legs and the skirts and we'll get those done. But let me just get this edge. Okay, that was got the top done. Now we're onto a leg. One of the interesting characteristics of the wood on this leg is we have these little splotches here that just kind of appear dirty. And I know with previous applications of stain, that just a dark stain right on top of that just really darkens that up incredibly and makes it look just like more dirt. So I'm hoping that with this, putting on the Simply White first, we don't get quite that same staining effect. I've used a technique similar to the white cloud, except instead of using this white cloud stain, we actually used some latex, some white latex primer, and then put a stain on top of that. It was a different kind of stain, but the technique seems to work really well, so I'm quite confident that this is going to give us the finish that we want. And the sample pieces, if there are any indication of how we're going to end up with the result, I'll be very pleased. The purpose of the Simply White on this, this being a much lighter color of wood than the top, is mostly to mask some of the knots here. Got a fairly big knot right up here in this corner, so we'll mute that quite a bit with this Simply White. And of course these blotches here, I want to mute them as much as possible. Also taking great pains not to get any stain inside the dovetail joints. That's going to be a glued joint, and I've decided to do all the staining of the pieces while they're apart. That way it just makes a much easier and cleaner stain. Don't wind up with odd marks where pieces join, and I don't have to deal with any leftover glue from a glue up, and because that will just repel the stain. Going to put a little bit of stain on the top and bottom here too, just because. There you are. Okay, get the other leg. I realize, watching paint dry isn't the most exciting content in the world, so I'll probably have fast forwarded through a whole bunch of this and skipped out a bunch of this, but yeah. You probably have better things to do with your time than to watch paint dry. This is another good example of where the grain of the oak is really absorbing the white stain. And I'm happy that it's doing that so it will absorb less of the dark stain. There's quite a few dark blotches on this particular side, so I'm being a little bit heavier with the white or with the Simply White on this piece. Okay, last we'll get the stringers over here and get them stained up. And again, I'm going to try to avoid getting any stain on the dovetail ends here. They will be completely buried in the dovetail joint on the leg. Alrighty, we'll call that one done. All right, and there we are. So all our pieces are now stained with the Simply White. This is another good illustration of how the white stain has soaked into the grain on this material. And by doing so, when the dark stain is applied, the chestnut stain won't be nearly as dark when it too gets absorbed into those grains. So it'll, like I say, the whole thing is muted out very nicely. And all of the pieces will have that much more consistent coloration to them. So this will need to set up for a couple hours, and then I'll come back and we'll do the chestnut. All right, our tabletop has had a couple hours to dry. So we'll now put on our chestnut stain. This is a gel coat, so it goes on a little bit thicker, but it rubs a little farther. So. Okay, here we go. Now I do want this to be pretty light. I don't want this to be a heavy dark coat. But right away I can see that this is turning out very nicely. The difference between this wood and this wood is not that much in terms of depth. But had we not done the Simply White, there would be a stark difference between those two pieces. And we still get a lot of grain coming through. So I'm really pleased with this result. This is looking good. Move you up a little bit as we get to there. So I am really liking that finish. That has come out very even across the entire piece. This section here is a little bit lighter, obviously, but it is a different cut of the wood. In fact, I believe this is actually white oak, not red. So to get that so close for a piece, two different species of oak, really, really happy with that. I'm just looking right now for any areas where I could do a little bit of touching up. And there's a couple around. Okay, I'm going to call that a finish on that side. Very happy with that. Okay, flip it over, do the other side. So this is the underside of the table, and I know there are a couple blemishes in this area, or on this side rather, so we will live with those. I'm gonna have to come back and just do a little bit of an adjustment in here. There's some pores that are not getting the chestnut stain in there, but we'll take care of that. Good thing I'm wearing gloves on this. I got it all over my fingers. I'll bring you in for a closer look here at where some of this dark grain or heavy grain would normally accept a stain and make it extremely dark. Putting on the Simply White first has just kind of nullified that effect. And it's just taking on the brown, just working out beautifully. Just going after a couple spots now that I don't think I have quite enough absorption. So we'll just get them taken care of and then we'll bring you in for a close-up. All right. Let me show you a little bit about what I'm talking about with this wood grain here. Bring in a little closer. So it's this grain here that I'm talking about. And had we not gone with the white, this would turn out to be the darkest of dark that you see there, all through this section of wood. So that has really made a remarkable difference, putting on the Simply White. And hidden a lot of the other blemishes in the wood too, so yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. Okay, I'm gonna move this over to the work table and bring the legs over and start working on them next. Okay, so I got one leg done. And I'll just now move on to the second leg. I want to point out that these legs are much lighter in color, like the wood itself is a much lighter wood than the tabletop, but with the application of the soft white and then this on top of it, they're going to come out very, very close. And with the legs, of course, underneath the table in different light, it would be difficult to know if it was the different color wood or just different light. Okay, very happy with that. Okay, I'll bring over the stringers and we'll get them on. And our last piece. All right, I think we can call it done. So I'll get the can closed up, I'll put the other piece over there, and then I'll take the camera over and show you all the pieces done on the work table. And what I'm considering to be fairly consistent results across all the pieces. So here's our pieces laid out on the work table. And from piece to piece, yes, there is some variation in color, definitely. But a lot of it depends on the light you're looking at it, one. And of course the tone of the wood. But overall, from piece to piece, we have a much more consistent coloring than we did with the wood native. And for those of you keeping score, this little can that I used here, a Minwax gel stain chestnut, I started with that can about half full when I started on the top. And I still have maybe about a ½ inch, maybe a quarter of an inch left in the bottom of the can. So I used probably a good third of the can to do that entire table. All right, next step will be assembling the legs once the stain has been dried. So we'll get those legs put together and then we'll mount the fittings that go on the top of the stringers. This is what we have here. This will go on top of the stringer, screw that in the stringer, and then a screw coming the other way into the top. So we'll get those holes built or drilled into the stringers. Then we'll varathane the legs assembled, and we'll varathane the top separately. Then we'll join it all together. So wait another couple hours for this to dry. In fact, I'll probably wait overnight and then do the varathane coat in the morning. We're into assembly now of the legs for the modern sofa table. So I'm going to put some glue in this dovetail joint and slip the stringers in. So we'll do this end first, then we'll do the other end. The other end is a little bit more of a snug fit. This I think is a little bit looser fit, but we'll give it a try. And we'll give it a little bit of persuasion. And just make sure I get down flush. And I'm happy with that. And we'll get rid of that excess glue. I'm just using a slightly dampened cloth to wipe out that glue. And this is precisely why I wanted to do all the staining before gluing these joints together. Getting rid of that glue on a really tight space like that is very difficult. At least I find it so. I know other people have mechanisms and ways of coping with that, but I thought I would take this approach. Okay, that one's in. We'll do the other one. Okay, that joint went right in there. Not quite as tight a fit as that other one. I may wind up trying to put a little spacer in behind that one. So I want to get that side up before any glue sets. I'm okay, I know I have time, but this side does require a little bit more persuasion, so sorry if the camera jiggles a little bit. That came out nice and flush. Very happy with that joint and that joint. Just make sure I get rid of any glue. So this joint is just a little looser than I want. So what I'm going to do is put a small nail on one side of this dovetail just to kind of drive it over and push it in. It did the job very nicely. I'm going to put in one more just down the other side. That's just enough to stiffen up the joint. And got a little bit of squeeze out on the bottom, which is exactly what I'm looking for. So there's our legs assembled. I'm going to give the glue a little chance to set up. And then we can apply the bare thing. Already we're going to be applying 2 coats of this bare-based polyurethane. That's the product that I'm using. Not sponsored, of course, in any way, but I found this to be a really nice product. I'm doing the side you can't see. Sorry about that. There will be 2 coats of this. So the first coat goes on, I put on fairly thick. Then we'll give it a light sand with 220 and put on the second coat. So there's the legs and supports first coat of Varathane all over. And over here on the work table, I've got the first coat on the top of the top side of the top. So we'll let this set up, and then I'm going to flip it over and do the underside. Let that set, flip it over again, and do a second coat on the top. I won't be doing the second coat on the underside of the table, but I will have 2 coats on the top, because that's my plan at the moment. So our top has had a little time to set up, and I'm just kind of running over it with the 220 sandpaper. It's just a really light pass, only done with a hand. I don't use any tools for this. It's just really a simple and quick process. But you can, just by running your hand over it, you can really feel the difference that this makes and provides a nice smooth finish when we're done. And that's it. Just touch the edges here. Give it a wipe down, and we'll put on that second coat. Even applying it with the brush, you can just instantly feel how much smoother it is, having gone over it with the 220. The other thing I want to point out with putting on this finish is that I'm not so much brushing it on as I'm using the brush to lay it on. So I'm not pushing hard with the brush at all. I'm just kind of dragging the brush along the material, along the surface rather. So I'm not really flexing the bristles at all. I have found in the past that flexing the bristles puts a lot of bubbles into the surface. But just kind of dragging it along just spreads the Varathane, or polyurethane in this case, very nicely. And I am putting it on pretty thick. That way it'll have a chance to lay out nice and flat. It'll flow a little better. Of course, these are all the things that work for me, and if you've got any tips on how to lay out Varathane, or you see me doing something that's horribly wrong, please let me know. It's always learning. Always interested in learning, so if you got tips or techniques, let me know. I will call that done. So that'll finish off the Varathane. Next I'm going to set the table up over here, the legs, to drill in the holes with a Forstner bit for these little brackets to hold on the top. So I'll set the camera up for that right after I clean out this brush. So I'll be back in a second. All right, so we're getting ready to put on these little anchors that'll hold the top to these stringers. And the theory is I'm going to put in 4 on each side. They'll be spaced about 10 inches apart. Look at that. We're going to measure it and set. Drill a little Forstner hole. It looks like a 3/4 inch bit, just to sink that into the stringer, then a pilot hole so we can screw it in. The concept behind these is that they can pivot a little bit as the top climatizes and stretches a little bit. These will rotate and allow that movement of the top. So that's why I'm going with these. What I want to make sure is I kind of get them all aligned in the same orientation, so that as that top moves back and forth, they have a way to go. There's a path for the top to take. So let me mark out these holes where I'm going to put them, and then get the Forstner bit set up and we'll drill them. Okay, got the holes marked out. I use my center punch just to set the hole where, make a little dimple so the bit won't stray. And we're just going to go down a little wee bit. A little bit more than that. We'll see how that fits. That looks about right. Yeah, not going to fit quite right on there. I have a feeling that this is metric and it's a little bit more than 3/4 of an inch. I'll use a chisel and just kind of clean that out a little bit. I'll come back when I have a good fit. Okay, so this one was a pretty tight fit. These pieces are actually 19 millimeters in diameter across that wide span, so a 3/4 inch bit is just a little too small. I did a little bit of chiseling and got that where it'll work. For this side, I changed to a 20 millimeter Forstner bit. And then I do need to chisel out a little channel after that hole's been cut, just to allow the piece to rotate a little bit. I'll just use the chisel and take some of that out. That'll work. Okay, I'll carry on doing that with all the other holes. Be back in a minute. All right, all the holes are drilled, so we're ready now to put in the screws. And I'm happy that those are going in easily without much resistance. So I'm going to switch to an automated tool just because I'm a wee bit lazy. I'm just going to back the screws off a little bit on some of these so there's a little more movement available. That's good. Okay, as soon as our top is dry, I'll flip it over and mount these, mount the legs onto that top, and we'll be done. So just a quick summary of the finishes that were applied to our modern sofa table. Was the Minwax Simply White, then the Minwax Gel Stain Chestnut, and finished off with a bare water-based polyurethane 2 coats. And here is the final result. Really pleased with that table. Hey, thanks for watching. Long video, but glad you stayed with me. Please like and subscribe.